Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. Today, you're about to discover the Liar's Gambit, a gambit I've recently discovered and that has blown my mind. I've studied it thoroughly to be able to share it with all of you, and so you enjoy it as much as I do. And not only that, but so you start winning many games thanks to it. Plus, it's a gambit that occurs after the two moves d4 and d5. That is, very popular moves, as you know, so you'll be able to play it in many, many games. That's why I like it so much, for that and for how spectacular it is. By the way, let's do a challenge to see if you like this video. Since I'm making this video for you for free, how about leaving a like and let's see if we reach 500 likes? Which might seem like very little to you because you're used to seeing very big YouTubers, but I prefer having a small audience where you're the best. So if you leave a like before we start, I'll truly be grateful to you forever. Now then, let's get started with this brutal gambit. I'll start with the move we've already seen on the channel, the move e4. We've seen this in a few other gambits, however. It won't be the same old thing, but a very novel gambit. Why are you giving away, chess teacher, this very important pawn? On the second move? Yes, well, we've always been taught that we shouldn't give away material, especially a central pawn. Well, that's the good thing about a gambit. A gambit means we give away material in exchange for having much more of an attack than our opponent. So when they capture this pawn, how should we respond? Well, we should respond by attacking it with this knight. Notice one thing, if your opponent here is careless and makes a move, that doesn't defend this pawn, we simply recapture it, and look at that, we've already recovered the material. However, the most common thing is for them to defend this pawn. And if I ask you, let's see, a normal developing move to defend this pawn, you'd normally say, for example, right? Knight f6. To me, it seems like a totally normal move. It would also be very normal, and I'm sure some of you thought of it, bishop 5. And that also seems like a very correct move, okay? Knight f6 is used much more, so let's start with this one here. What we're going to do is directly as if it were a Spanish opening, but in reverse. If you don't know what the Spanish opening is, don't worry. It's this move here, but in reverse, we do it on the other side. Why is this move so interesting? Well, we're attacking this pawn defended by a knight. So if the one defending is this knight, we're going to attack this knight. So what should the black pieces do? Well, they must defend this pawn again. Why? Because if it were our turn again, we'd capture this knight, and when they recapture, then we could recapture this pawn, because the defender would no longer exist. That's why it's so important that when we play this bishop here, they defend this pawn again with this move right here. I say with this move here because notice that there is no other move, no other possibility to defend it. With the queen, it wouldn't be possible because we have the knight. So bishop f5, a completely unique move. And now, how are we going to continue? Well, you probably won't expect this move because it's a bit strange, but it's a star move of the gambit. We're going to place the queen on e2. The main reason we do this is to keep attacking this point. We're attacking with the knight, and we're attacking with the queen. It looks like we attack with 2 and they defend with 2, but they're really only defending with 1 because we can take out this knight whenever we want. Now, I'm sure you're all thinking, wait a minute, chess teacher, you're going crazy. Now, there's a very easy way to defend this pawn, by capturing this pawn that you just hung by moving the queen. Look how easy. I eat this pawn, and I also defend this pawn with 3 pieces. What happened here, chess teacher? Are you going crazy? And what do I always tell you? Obviously, I'm going crazy, but it's because this works. Now, when the queen comes to capture this pawn, we're simply going to come here to give this check and attack the bishop, a double attack. Notice one thing. When we move queen e2, our goal was never to capture this point here, which is what everyone thinks. Our goal is to come through here. That's why when they capture this pawn, which they will in 90% of cases, they've lost the game after this spectacular move. Check, and we take the bishop. However, many of you are thinking, wait, chess teacher, today you really are going completely insane. Because if it's check and I attack the bishop, I just defend it with the bishop itself. But here you're overlooking that we're also attacking this point right here. We take this pawn, and now friends and friends, we're attacking this rook that seems very hard to defend. They can't bring the queen here defended by the knight because our knight is there, but they do have this move here, right? You'll tell me, chess teacher, they defend everything here. Well, here we'd slip in through here and practically deliver a checkmate. What happens? They have this queen that can come back to block. So this move wouldn't be as good as it seems. What should we do, chess teacher? If I can't take the rook and I can't go in for checkmate, well, don't worry, because this queen, no matter how much they attack it, isn't moving from here, because we have the brilliant bishop pin move. Notice that now this bishop can't capture the queen because it's pinned against its own king, and so the only move that saves the defense of this bishop is to come with the queen to interpose, right? They block the queen, they block the bishop, and this is where they want us to trade queens. Why? Because they're up a pawn. However, now that the queen is no longer here, we can slip in and give him this checkmate where the king can't get out of here. We'll start by playing d4. This is the move you must start playing to perform the gambit, and they almost always respond with d5. If not, well, we can try to do it a little bit later. But the trap, as such, it works with d4, d5. We'll play e4, giving away a super important pawn, and now we're going to attack it with the knight. You must remember this. You know, it's very easy to remember these traps because since you can watch the videos as many times as needed, well, simply when you don't remember, you watch it again, and that's it. Super easy. You save the video and that's it. We attack this pawn. They defend it either with the knight or with the bishop. It's fine because now we're going to attack the knight. They're going to defend it with the bishop. They must do this. Why am I going through it so fast? Because if they don't do this, we would directly recover the material. Okay? That's why the most normal thing is for them to defend that pawn so as not to lose material. Star move here. Do you remember or do you not remember? Queen e2. Is queen e2 mainly to attack this pawn and recover material? No. That's what they think, but no. Our main objective is, as much as we give away another pawn, we want to come over here to give the check, attack the bishop, and take this pawn here. Obviously, the only option they have is to come with the bishop, because any other option, for example, blocking the check, we'd take the bishop, and that really would be too much material advantage, right? So we calculate directly coming here. When we capture this pawn, which we must capture, okay, it's the only move that gives us the advantage, capturing this pawn when they defend with the bishop. So notice that there's no other way than to come with the bishop here, because if they come with the knight, for example, we take the rook, which is why all these are forced moves. What does forced moves mean? Studying forced moves means those moves that the opponent has to make no matter what, which is why these gambits are so effective, because we already know what moves our opponent must make no matter what. Okay, now when they play bishop c6, what were we going to do? Pin this bishop with the move bishop b5, and now we've seen that this move was a disaster because we slipped in to give mate, but other moves exist, like for example queen d7 continuing to defend the mate. So first we trade this bishop here, important, and now they have two moves. If they capture with the queen, checkmate again, look at those attacks. If they capture with the knight, we take the rook, so they can't capture with either the queen or the knight. And if they don't capture this bishop, they would simply be losing the queen because of the pen. What does this mean? That queen d7 is a move, or rather a disaster of a move. Queen d6 would be checkmate. Queen d7 is also a disaster because of bishop takes bishop. So what other options do the black pieces have then? Sure, you'll tell me if I move the queen, I lose no matter where I move her. So, well look, I'll let this rook be captured, and I'll take this bishop at least. I only lose the exchange. I have an extra pawn, it's absolutely fine. However, here we're not going to capture the rook, but instead we'll recapture this bishop with the knight. Very important, remember this, okay? If I come here with the bishop and they take the bishop, I recapture with the knight. And now the threat is massive, they can't do anything. I attack the queen, and not only that, but I attack this point right here. And not only that, but I attack the rook as well. And many of you will say, well, there's a move that seems to defend practically everything. Which is this one? Well, this one defends the rook. But we always have this move right here, check, and we take the queen. And not only that, but we have a brutal checkmate. And how would this checkmate work? We simply come to give check over here. It must block with the queen. And then we jump with the knight to give check. Neither the knight nor the queen can be captured. The knight can't be captured because the queen is pinned, and the queen can't be captured because it's the knight. That's given check, incredible or what? Okay, this is very important. When they capture the central pawn, we'll play the knight, they play the knight, we come to attack, and now, super important, we play queen e2. What happens if they don't capture this pawn, chess stitcher? Because you're basing the whole video on them capturing that pawn. But well, it's very likely they won't capture it, because they've seen this check right here. Well, alright then. It's very likely, and it can happen. For example, they can play e6, directly defending this bishop. It's true, it's a much better move. However, I'm also going to show you how to punish it. By the way, I have occasionally received a comment that tells me the following. These videos don't work because if they play perfectly, they beat us. Look, this is very important, okay? Whenever they play perfectly against us, they're gonna win, always. Right? Only machines are capable of playing perfectly. So these videos are for learning how to punish the opponent's mistakes. If your opponent makes this mistake, you'll know how to punish it. And it can also be very useful for you not to make them yourselves. So these videos are much more useful than you might think. I've won many chess tournaments throughout my life, and I promise you that learning this is very helpful, right? So now we move on to the important part. What happens if they discover that we've played queen e2 to come here and not to recapture the pawn, and they play, for example, e6, right? Well, first of all, I'll tell you that now, having protected this and not having come through here, whenever you want, you can win back the material. Like, for example, bishop takes knight, and when they recapture, we take this pawn. Why? Because you already know that now we have two pieces attacking and only one defending this knight. We can eliminate it whenever we want. Perfect. Besides that, I think there are much better moves than capturing this knight, and I'm going to show you which ones are better, in my opinion. We'll start with long castling. Look, a castle where the rook is already placed on the same file as the queen, a super powerful file. So now seeing that they're stuck, for example, in this pin that's so offensive for their knight, right? Notice this knight can never move because of the queen. The queen is also around here. Well, the very logical move, right, is to develop this bishop to e7. Notice it blocks the pin, and it doesn't really have a much better square because it doesn't attack anything here either, right? There's no pin or anything. Bishop e7 is the most common move by a long shot. Well then, what could you do here? Could you do the same thing again, capturing this knight and then capturing this pawn? Definitely. Whenever you feel lost in this gambit, you can win the pawn back, and you're left with the same material we had at the start, and a good attack. However, as I said, there are much better moves. In this case, we're gonna continue with the gambit line. We're gonna play f3. Now black is gonna be rubbing their hands together. Why? Because they were thinking, man, I want an extra pawn at the start. It all seemed so simple, but they can win it back whenever they want. And with us playing 3, they've seen the light, because they can trade this pawn, get rid of the extra pawn they had, and once we recapture it, well, we've made a pawn trade, and black keeps the extra pawn. So how are we gonna win this pawn back? Well, with the knight. We want to develop our knight in exchange for losing this pawn, which is a gambit. We give away a pawn in exchange for having much more initiative and much more of an attack. Black is ready to castle, for example, but it's already too late, because we have a very well-managed attack. Look, don't just learn the moves by heart. It's better to memorize the attacking plan. Right now, what is the attacking plan? Well, we have a spectacular attack on the enemy's castle position, for example, with these two pawns. I'm telling you, you won't even notice you're down a pawn when you carry out the attack, because it's impossible. Alright, how's our attack gonna start? In this case, with knight e5, a super strong move. What am I aiming for with knight e5? I'm not trying to threaten anything, because notice it doesn't threaten anything, but rather to place a knight in an excellent position to advance our pawns while they're supported and launch a totally spectacular attack on the king. Besides, there's no pawn that can threaten this knight. They can only threaten it with the other knight, but we don't care. Whatever they do, we make this move here, a super powerful move attacking the bishop. You might ask, let's see, can they trade for this knight? No. Mistake, a very serious mistake, because by recapturing, you make a discovered attack on the queen, you attack the knight, you attack the bishop, and they'll lose a lot of material here. So right now, they couldn't recapture the knight. Well, if not, sorry. If they can't recapture the knight, how should they continue? Well, obviously, by moving this bishop away, they have no other choice. And as they move this bishop, we're gonna come in with this other pawn. Look at what a brutal attack. We are carrying out on the queen side. We're launching a brutal attack on the castled king, and not just there. Now, if they get distracted and make any move, like this one for example, we'd simply win the bishop because it has nowhere to go. Notice that here we also have the knight and the queen, so there's only one move that works here, which is this one right here. It opens up a square for the bishop, and not only that, it also attacks our bishop. But this is already a serious mistake. Why? Because they're weakening themselves too much. How could things continue? Well, we'd simply capture this. Sorry, I can't talk today. This bishop here with the knight, forcing them to recapture this knight because we're also attacking the rook. So when they recapture, look at the weakness that's been created over here. This pawn has moved, we can come in to give check with the queen, and this would be terrifying for the black pieces. Notice they can't capture here now because it's check. They'd have to move the king. And when they move the king, look, we have such a strong attack with all our pieces coordinated, which is key, and that's why we gave up the pawn, to have a much stronger attack. And look at this right now, do you care about being a pawn down? First, we've already won it back. And second, look at our bishops, our queen, our pawns, our rooks. We're completely winning. The black pieces can't do absolutely anything here. Look, there was a game. If you want, I'll show you how to punish it quickly. They played this here to try to save themselves. I looked to see if there was a game with these exact moves, and there was one, for example, this one tried to defend with this move. He simply advanced this pawn. Why? Because if he captures the bishop, it would simply be checkmate right here. So this bishop is totally untouchable. It's a bishop that can't be captured. In this case, they came here with the knight to try to defend and attack the queen, but look, this is absolutely useless. The attack is completely lethal. No matter how much they try to attack our queen, we have much better moves. In this case, for example, what would it be? Capturing this pawn here with our pawn, thus giving a check to the king. They can't capture because it would be checkmate shortly, so they're better off moving the king, and then the sacrifice simply came here. We sacrifice even more pieces. No matter how much they capture, we can enter with the rook, and this would be checkmate. Look, what a brutal way to punish this enemy king. And now I'll review two typical mistakes that the black pieces make when we play this gambit. I'll go over them quickly because they're very easy to punish. And also, after these two mistakes, I'll quickly show you a trap very similar to this one, but with the black pieces that you can also perform, okay? So first of all, when they capture us here and we come here, we must come in with the bishop. Now we've seen that this was a mistake, right? So what about playing knight to c6? A normal developing move, saying, well, I won't defend this pawn because I know you'll get it back whenever you want. Chess teacher, can I now capture this knight like you've told me several times in this video, and when they recapture, take this pawn? Of course. I've already told you one thing. Whenever you say, oh, I don't know how to continue, you can get the pawn back by taking this knight and taking here. And on top of that, you'll have a good center. However, there are better options, okay? For example, if they play knight to c6, a better option is to play d5, attacking this knight very strongly. Notice that when it moves here, for example, we can come in with the queen, attacking the knight, attacking the pawn with two pieces. It won't even be necessary to capture this knight, and we'll have a much better position. For example, later by castling long, if they come this way, we castle long, putting on tremendous pressure. And our position is much better than our opponents, simply being a pawn down, and not only that, but we can get the pawn back whenever we want, and we'll also have equal material and much more of an attack. And a very typical mistake when we play this gambit, before all this, look, okay? Here we've attacked the pawn, they defend it with the knight, but not before all this, but directly at the start, attacking the pawn, they defend it with another pawn. At first glance, it already looks like a bad move, but you must know how to punish it, okay? A very valid option is applying the principles I've explained, playing f3, capturing here, and developing the knight. We'd have a much better position with this black pawn here that doesn't belong at all. But there's an option that I love and has won me many games. It's placing this bishop here, tempting our opponent to threaten it. And it seems they have it well trapped, right? So here they've already lost the game after the move queen to h5, check. And notice that the king is super weakened on this diagonal. Now, having moved this pawn, they can't block with this pawn, which would be very easy to defend. With this pawn here, they're forced to move the king this way. Look, what an ugly position. There's no way to save themselves from here. For example, we can continue with bishop to c4, putting pressure on this diagonal. In fact, they can never take this bishop because on top of that, we take their rook. So this would be totally one for us. And now to finish on a high note, I'm going to show you how to use a little trap with the black pieces that's very similar to this trap we've done with the white pieces. You're going to love it. Let's go. And now we come to the final trap with the black pieces that's very similar, which I'm sure you've seen at some point, which is when they play d4 against you. We're going to play e5, directly giving away the pawn, and when they capture it, we'll attack it with the knight. Notice that here they have two options to defend it, with the knight and with the bishop, just like what we've seen with the black pieces. By the way, before I forget, please, if you've made it to the end of the video, remember that I work really hard on these videos. Leave a like and any supportive comment is greatly appreciated, really, because you only see the final result, you sit down and it looks perfect, but they take a lot of work behind the scenes, okay? Thank you all so much. Here they can defend the pawn with two options, knight to f3 or even bishop to f4. It doesn't matter to us, whatever they do, because if they play knight to f3, for example, first, now we'll attack with the queen, and notice that the only option now is with the other piece. So the order doesn't matter, and here we've already won the game with the same move. We come here, we didn't want to get the pawn back, but we wanted to give this check, win this bishop, and take over here. A very similar trap with the black pieces. What'd you think? Did you like it? Remember that if you loved this video and you like the channel, you have available both this channel as well as the digital channel. You know, we have two channels with daily videos. You can subscribe to the one you like most or both if you like it a lot, okay? And you'll have daily videos on both this channel and the digital channel, Chess Teacher and Chess Teacher Digital. I hope you loved this video. I really loved recording it, and I'll see you in the next video, friends. Bye.